Hello and welcome to the Marcus Milione podcast. I am Marcus Milione. A lot of you guys probably are listening from TikTok and or Instagram, so nice to meet you on a different medium. Pretty much how this first podcast is going to go, I am going to run through the background on myself and also kind of try to touch on a bunch of the common questions I'll get. So on my TikTok and Instagram, I'll run questions, and a lot of times it's the same stuff, especially when I'm live. So I figure, if I have one place I can point people to listen through and answer a bunch of their questions about my background and who I am, this is a good place for it. So let's start, let's take it all the way back to, freshman year of high school, right? Because I think that's kind of where I first started to explore who I was or who I planned on becoming. And, transferring into a brand new school, I hadn't known anybody, and it was a smaller high school. So all of the kids that I had gone to middle school with were now no longer at this high school. And for me, being naturally introverted made things kind of difficult in the beginning. I transferred there to play lacrosse, right? Because I started to set my sights on a goal of mine, which was Division I lacrosse. I didn't really understand what went into that. I just kind of set my mind on that goal and decided to chase it. And this high school was going to give me a better opportunity to do that. So my parents and I talked it over. We ended up going, whatever. So I get there and it's really difficult. So in the beginning, I had known kids from when I was younger, but we didn't talk a lot in the beginning. And, a lot of them I grew up kind of either playing sports with in the rec leagues or being opponents of in different travel leagues. So I was extroverted, so I didn't talk to them immediately and kind of just kept to myself. This ends up me, pretty much hating my life in the beginning of school. And it went on like this all the way until kind of lacrosse season rolled around, which is in the spring. So kind of that first half of the year was rough. Anyway, school gets dramatically better once I start kind of bonding with my teammates and we can, become friends. We get close and, some of those teammates are still my closest friends to this day, which is great. We go into junior year and I am committed already to play Division I lacrosse. Now, me leading up to this point, it was my first time ever setting a lofty goal for myself and, having to put in the work to get there, right? So I remember my dad introducing me to this personal trainer type athletic trainer, a lot of sports performance training. And I started doing that kind of freshman year, sophomore year of high school. And that was my first introduction to training, right? And fitness. And I was very blessed to be able to work with somebody like this because not only did they understand functional movements and, how lifting and sport translate, they also understood nutrition and diet. So this was my first, introduction to how you eat is going to directly affect how you perform. And, up until, I guess, maybe a year and a half ago, I was always training for sport. So it was never, for aesthetics or to look a certain way. It was, let's use my body and let's lift weights so that we can perform at our sport the best we can. And I think now when people ask about training or how long I've been training, it's been since I was 16. I'm 26 now, so it's been 10 years. And it wasn't always to look this way, right? I was never, the bulkiest kid or like the biggest kid or even the strongest kid. I was just, functionally strong is how I would put it. But before I jump all the way, to present day me, I want to keep running through kind of my high school into college days. So junior year, I finally accomplished my goal that I set out to do. And it was my first taste of like, you need to put in a lot of work in order to get to where you wanted to be, right? So I committed, I was looking back at the amount of hours put in between training, conditioning, on the field work, and it was a ton, but I enjoyed the process, and that's very important. And I want to kind of hammer that point home because I think as you go through life, like you'll set these lofty goals for yourself. And once you get there, it might not like be all that you thought it was going to be, right? But the beauty is in that process of getting there. So enjoy whatever process you're going through right now as you work toward, an end goal that you have in mind. So high school ends, whatever, it's fine. We go into college, and college for me was something in which my preconceived notion of it was a lot different than kind of what it actually was. And I think it is a lot to do. I think it has a lot to do with, how college is kind of portrayed in, TV or movies. And then you get there and you're playing a sport, you have school, you're supposed to be getting good grades. You have to not only be focusing on these grades to get a good job, but you now have this sport weighing over you where you have to, spend 2+ hours a day focused on. So I get there and time management, like all over the place, right? I am not great with just sitting down and focusing on anything for a long period of time. But, in college, that was kind of required because we were so crunched for time all the time. And I get there and I'm not great at school, right? So I wasn't great at school in high school, but I could get by doing what I was doing, kind of bare minimum. I didn't figure this out till later in my life, but I hate the way you learn when you're in school. Personally, it doesn't fit my learning style. Like I'm a very hands-on, like do it myself. I'd rather, do an apprenticeship or learn under a mentor or, trial and error instead of now you're in an environment where you're sitting in a classroom and you have a professor telling you how to think. You have a professor telling you what is right and wrong. And at the end of the day, you're not really doing any thinking for yourself, which kind of drove me crazy because, anytime you question what we're being told, like it was either right or wrong. It was, there was no gray. There was no real, time for thought out conversation or debate because you're in class. So like no one wants to be the guy raises his hand to challenge the teacher, in the middle of a subject, right? You're just going to sit there and you're going to take it and then you're just going to either be bored in class or, just try to get through it, which is exactly what I was. And my grades were not good. We'll just leave it at that. So sports kind of was, sports and lifting was all I really had known coming out of high school. And I didn't really start to explore like personal growth in the way of kind of mentally till a bit later, kind of junior year of college. So my mindset was always just work extremely hard, work as hard as you can, and then, everything else will fall into place. But in the corporate world, where I had already, kind of junior, senior year of high school set my sights on, I just want to go work on Wall Street, right? All I wanted to do was be a trader. And then in college, kind of narrowed that down. I just want to trade derivatives. And as you start to enter that arena, you start to understand, the politics that go on in getting a job. So not only do I not have great grades, but I'm not at a target school. And that makes things extremely difficult, especially in the world of finance, especially in the world of Wall Street itself. So that's something I'm actively trying to deal with, partially kicking myself because I should have probably put more time in at school, but it's frustrating because I just hate the environment. And then we're playing the sport in which I loved in high school. And you hit a point, or I hit a point where the sport becomes a job. And I don't mind working hard. I've always prided myself on how hard I work. But at the same time, I just became miserable going to practice, going to lift, and ended up into junior year just hating my existence, pretty much. So this kind of threw me into a pretty bad mental place. It was dark there probably until, I graduated. I was not happy. I've talked about this a bit before, but there was a small group of people that kept me going, and also there were my parents. So I lived 3 hours from school, and it hit a point where we would get done practices on Saturday mornings, and I would drive home just to be home for a day until I had to drive back, Sunday night to make practice on Monday morning. And, the amount of anxiety and pressure that came along with just being in a place, feeling stuck in a place where you are extremely unhappy, where the moment you wake up every single morning, you get washed over with a feeling of dread. That's extremely difficult. So this starts to be when I explore art for the first time, which ultimately will pull back into the fashion aspect of my life. We touched on the fitness. I always trained extremely hard, dieted extremely hard, but I'm forced to take my Art 1 elective. And it is a Painting 1 class. I was taking it with my best friend. And, went into it with an open mind. Stuff couldn't get that much worse, so I figured we'll just go in with an open mind. So Father McNally, my teacher, who ends up being, one of the smartest teachers I had at the school, extremely well-spoken, worldly. He had traveled the world. He was a Jesuit priest, so he had done a lot of missions elsewhere in the world, which gave him a lot of insight into just different people, cultures, and he kind of encompassed all of that at once. So I joined the class, and the thing I loved most about the way that he held the class is, for the first time, senior year of college, that I'm on campus in a classroom where you are allowed to do it your way. And this was, kind of music to my ears. So you could paint whatever. You could use, I think we only had acrylic paints, but he probably would have let you use any medium. Could have used paper mache if you wanted to. So I grabbed the smallest brush I could. I grab small canvases and I try to, be a perfectionist on the first go. And I think that talks a lot about my personality, because everything I do, I just want it to be perfect. And I get very frustrated if, there's a learning curve and I don't get it right away. And so my paintings were me just trying to be perfect, having it be like realism almost. Anybody that's painted with acrylics knows realism is probably not something you just pick up and start doing on your first day of art class. So I do a couple paintings, and it is noticeably relieving stress as I'm doing it. I can tell that I am working through emotions that I have inside of me that I hadn't expressed or had a way to, let out of my brain as I'm sitting there painting. So I have some of these paintings at home, and they're at my parents' house. And if you look at them, I don't know if I'll ever show them because, one, I don't like them anymore, and two, they're extremely dark. Like very dark, and you can just look at them and look at the stuff that I produce now and tell that, I am in two completely different headspaces. So I start to do that. I would break up my time between, instead of going home on the weekends for a Saturday night, instead of going out, I would go to the art studio and I would just paint, because, I could kind of just do anything, like unlimited supplies, as big as I wanted. And this was around the time that Father McNally started to not teach me, but he forced me to work with bigger canvases and a bigger brush. And so in doing so, nothing was perfect anymore. I couldn't do small, perfect details. Everything had to come out in a bigger, more grand brush stroke. And if you look back, this was him pushing me outside of my comfort zone. And I think about it a lot because after I graduated, I was moving to New York, out of my comfort zone, alone. And, there were a lot of parallels to what I was about to be experiencing with what he was trying to teach me. So I start painting a lot. It gets me through. And this is into senior year. Kind of pretty much started painting through the end of college. But at the same time, we're going into let's just go into the summer of junior to senior year. We'll round off the fitness aspect of this real quick. So me and my friend, Tyler, shout out Tyler if you ever hear this, we decided that we were going to do one of our first very serious cuts. And because we both weren't playing at the time, and, we just needed a reason to get out of bed in the morning. So we joined a gym that was near our house, even though we had access to the student athlete gym. The strength coach was not chill with us training in the morning, or he was not chill with how much we wanted to be training. And so Tyler and I were pretty much trial and error figuring out how to get as shredded as possible. So we would just read, and a lot of it would come from Reddit, and a lot of it would come from just, whatever we could read up on. And we would follow YouTubers. We would follow the OGs of the fitness industry on YouTube, the influencers and stuff, and figure out how were they, getting shredded. So then we loop my brother into it. We start a Snapchat group where, that's all we talked about, because it was really the only thing. It was the only thing keeping me going. I would, like Tyler and I would be driving to practice, and we would look at each other and just be like, okay, well, practice might be 2 hours and it might suck and we might hate the entire time, but we're burning calories and that's all that matters. And so we just became so obsessed with calories, and then we started tracking food in MyFitnessPal, and that's when I opened my first MyFitnessPal account, and I was tracking everything, and I at the time didn't even know about like your TDEE, total daily energy expenditure number. I wasn't even calculating that. I wasn't on a proper deficit daily. I just knew I wanted to eat. I was eating around like 2,500 calories just because we were waking up at 6 a.m. to go train at the gym that Tyler, actually, there's a funny story about this gym. The entire cut, Tyler had a membership, and I would use a guest pass every single day, and the front desk guy just didn't care so much that I worked out there for like over 3 months just because we were there so early in the morning, and the front desk guy couldn't care about, making me pay. So we would train before we went to class, and this is when we're following still like a functional kind of sports training plan. Lots of like explosive movements, stuff like that. So it was nothing like I'm running now with a push-pull leg split, focused more on like aesthetics and stuff. This was very, functional, written by my sports performance coach back home. But, we started to see really good results. And this cut is kind of what got me addicted to, this is how I want to go into every summer. So me, my brother, and Tyler learned a lot during that, couple months cutting, spent a lot of time doing that. And it was a great way to refocus my energy. And instead of have everything about, sports be negative for me at the time, we kind of spun it into, at least we're burning calories. And we would just like go so hard at practice just because we'd be trying to burn calories. And it ended up being great. I think, it kind of helped us both in a way. I don't know, I obviously don't live inside of his head, but I don't know if he was in the greatest headspace either. And I don't think my brother was in a great headspace. So, it kind of was like us three on this Snapchat group just like grinding away and just working really hard. So we graduate, and all I can say is that the morning of graduation, I woke up in my room, and it was literally like somebody had stepped off of my chest. Like I knew in my head it was done. I never had to do it again. And I was so, relieved. Just such pressure taken off that it was finally over, and I'd just been like waiting for that moment. And I think that's where that day is kind of starting point of a lot of personal growth in the way of, how I think, how I view life, me kind of just chasing after things I want to chase. So we graduate, and a week before graduation, I had seen on Instagram that Wilhelmina was holding a model scouting casting call in Jersey, and we weren't far from Jersey. Tyler's family had a house down there, and he was going to go surf, and I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go to this casting call and see what happens. Turns out I ended up getting signed, and that's what brought me to New York City. So I'm up here modeling, which is my now first introduction to kind of real fashion. So outside of the world of like college student fashion, I guess, which is pretty tragic. So we get to New York, and I'm now surrounded by obviously just a lot of people being in the city. I'm also surrounded by fashion. I start reading more about fashion. I start seeing fashion. And it's around this time where I see a picture of A$AP Rocky's in front of a Ferrari 458, I think, like a silver Ferrari. He's wearing like floral Gucci jeans and like a printed button-down shirt. And I remember for the first time thinking like, that guy understands how to dress. Like, this looks good. I don't know how he pulled it off, but this looks good. And I need to start finding outfits that look good on me. So I start to experiment with outfits. And let me just tell you, in the beginning, terrible. I look back on some of the outfits that I put together and it's just like horrible. But I think that's the only way you can refine a style. It's very funny to me because one of the most asked questions I get on my TikTok is about where I got my glasses. And I'll tell you a funny story, and this is in no way a jab to my mom. Love her dearly. She's just, old school. And I got these glasses junior year of college. I remember going to Garrett Light, California Optical in Soho. This was a collaboration. I happened to stumble upon these while I was in there, and they were $500. And I remember at the time, like $500 to drop on glasses. I was like, oh my God, not including the frames. Not including the lenses. Lenses are going to be like $200. And I just remember thinking, getting a hot flash as I swiped my card. This was my first kind of serious fashion purchase. Anyway, I go back to Virginia, or I see my mom for the first time. We're standing around our island in the kitchen, and I have them on after my internship had ended that summer. And I don't remember exactly what she said, but she made a remark in which I knew she was going to make this remark before I even saw her with the glasses on, because that's just the way she approaches, new or different things that she's not used to. So before this, I had, typical square black frame glasses, kind of like Superman-ish, but not that big. So it was completely new to her, like a blonde tortoiseshell. I don't know like what she was thinking about them, but it's funny to laugh at now because, I just recently purchased my dad a pair of Garrett Lights that are now his daily glasses, and they are kind of brown tortoiseshell, same shape as mine. And then my mom needed new glasses, and I got her a pair of blonde tortoiseshell glasses. So it's come from full circle from her kind of like being, not even like making fun of my glasses, but kind of being caught off guard with the change. And that's fine. That's how she is. She's old fashioned, love her to death. But it's to always be expected when I buy new things like that. It's gotten a lot better. Trust me, like some of the stuff I buy, she doesn't even say anything now because I think she understands kind of the vision or where I'm coming from, but it was a little rough there in the beginning. So what was I talking about? My fashion. Yeah, putting together pretty bad outfits. I put together a lot of terrible stuff, but that's how you find your kind of like your flow, I would say. And around this time, I was starting to explore kind of moving out of modeling and into a long-term career in finance because, I liked the long-term aspect of it and the outlook of it better than modeling. But before I get to that, while I was modeling, I pretty much stopped lifting weights heavy. So where I was, 190 pounds graduating college, dropped to at one point like 167, and I was just like running, running kind of 2 miles daily and not lifting heavy weight on any program. Didn't have a program. I would just go in, do different machines. Didn't want to get bulky. I was trying to get as thin as possible because all I wanted to do was model high-end, high-fashion stuff. And so I lost, a ton of muscle coming to the end of modeling there. I was very thin. My brother had a nickname for me called Skeletor. And I mean, looking back on some of the pictures, like it's, I guess, maybe a bit of body dysmorphia, where what you see isn't actually as is. And you know what? That happens. A lot of people that are in fitness, I think, kind of struggle with that aspect of it all, is you're always chasing something better, and I wanted to be thinner to fit the, fit those type of like high-end clothes. So that led me to, just running a lot and not lifting heavy weights, not lifting, on any plan at all. So I go back into finance. I leave modeling. And around this time, I am really grinding it out, like waking up at 4 a.m. and, getting into the gym at 5. Not lifting seriously yet, but, starting to toy with the idea of putting some size back on, but just working really long days. I would get in to the gym at 5. I would get into the office 7, and I would get home like 7 or 8, Compared to iBanking hours, not crazy, but, it was a bit different than what I had been doing and took some adjusting. So that gets me into kind of my probably first most asked question that I always get is, what do you do? And it's always finance on the commercial real estate side. And I just leave it at that. So for the people that, constantly ask that question, hopefully you made it this far in the podcast. And yeah. But this takes us up to about a year and a half ago. I finally made the switch after Sean calling me Skeletor enough times. I was like, you know what? I started to get into like the aesthetics of kind of like bodybuilding and seeing, people like, I don't remember like specific, like kind of like Jeff Seed types on Instagram, and seeing, this aesthetic movement where, yes, they're big, but they're not lifting to be like Mr. Olympia. And so I had to figure out and do some research onto like a new type of training because, my whole life I'd either just been running and not following a plan like the last couple years, or, all those years before I was lifting, to have functional strength, not to be big, not to look a certain way. It was never about looks. It was all about staying injury free and performing very well at your sport. So now it's none of that. And we start to work on finding a plan. I settle on the NSUNS 6-day push-pull legs split. So Monday push, Wednesday pull, Monday push, Tuesday pull, Wednesday legs, Thursday push, Friday pull, Saturday legs. But I had also previously trained for a half marathon, and I had built up a pretty insane cardio base that I never wanted to lose, right? So in my mind, it was always, I need to maintain this level of conditioning while putting on size. And in the beginning, it freaked me out because anybody that does cardio knows, as you put on muscle and as you put on size, that it uses up oxygen kind of faster than if you were just lean and light. But we needed to find a way to keep, that cardio base. So I decided that, I would just run 2 miles every day of the work week because I didn't have time to do more. I would just use a 2-mile run at a quicker pace as my warm up to lift. Now, if there's like lifting purists listening to this, I know this is not ideal for building muscle. I know that, I'm going to sacrifice some gains here, but I pride myself on my conditioning level and my ability to, distance run at a very respectable pace. So I would use that 2 miles as warm up into my lifts. And so I started doing, push-pull legs, and to be honest, kind of got newbie gains again, if that makes sense. So got newbie gains again kind of quick into, the first couple 3-ish months. And then we had a family trip scheduled. Knowing this, I obviously, you want to be as lean as possible. I mean, I do at least. And so did my brother. So we started, I started like maintaining / cutting, I guess. I know, thermogenesis doesn't really allow such a thing, but I was trying to put on muscle while also shedding fat and being leaner. It ended up working out pretty well in my favor because, most of the fitness stuff or the picture that circulates the most on TikTok from, my TikToks that are fitness oriented is at the end of, kind of toward the end of that cut, couple months before the end of that cut. And yes, people comment all the time, I don't have the most muscle. Yes, I know. I was literally still trying to build muscle, but, it was nice to see the progress that was being built. And so it came down to, that cut ends and it's time for my first real lean bulk. And I had to decide kind of where my weak points were. And it was always like my back, but I loved training back, but I didn't understand the idea of kind of like mind muscle connection and how you can really use that to build up your back. So we've been training back pretty hard. I don't know if it's done anything, but yeah, we'll leave it at that. That remains to be seen as we go into a cut for the summer. But that's enough kind of like life story, fitness related. That brings us back to pretty much present day, where we're at. Another thing that I just want to talk about is my mindset, because I think I offer a unique kind of outlook on life where I don't kind of subscribe to the typical young person in their 20s, way of life, if that makes sense. So I've always been an extremely driven person. And in that, everybody knows that if you have a goal, there is kind of the right and wrong things you should be doing to get toward that goal. And there's things that you can do that will move you further down that path to accomplishing that goal. And there are things that, can either set you back or make no progress at all. And the way I always prioritize my time and prioritize my life is maximize the amount of things that I am doing to push myself down that path toward my goals. And this meant, a lot of sacrifices in personal life, kind of like, I don't find as much joy in like going out and getting drunk and then you're hungover the next day and you've now blown a day and that the amount of guilt that comes with that is enough for me not to, want to partake, because I just want to continue to force myself and push myself down this road as fast as possible. I'm always chasing kind of like 10 years out and seeing how much time I can cut down by doing, the small things daily. And I've talked about this a bit on TikTok, but you look at your life and you look at kind of your goals as something at the top of a skyscraper. If every day over the course of 10 years, you add a Lego to the base of your skyscraper that you're building toward that goal, and, on enough days you do positive good toward you getting there instead of either nothing or negative good, whether that be, really whatever. I'm not even saying that you can't go out and enjoy yourself, just positive good in you took more steps towards your goal than you didn't. Over time, you will build up to that goal, but it's not going to happen overnight. And so having patience, which is something I struggle with, but also having the ability to keep that in mind daily on such a long time frame is something, I think everybody, including myself, can continue to be better at. And I've always thought like this, like going back to kind of 16, 17 years old, it was always setting extremely lofty expectations and trying to chase after them and kind of giving up on certain things that I deemed not advancing me toward where I wanted to be. And so when you see my TikToks on day in the life stuff or kind of vlog style, or even like me eating the same meals daily because I don't want to have to make decisions daily about what I'm going to eat, this is all part of, what goes into my thinking about goals and trying to achieve those goals. So right now, we are exploring the creative aspect of kind of content creation. We're doing a podcast, we're TikToking, and in doing all of these things, the thing I like most about it is the connection to the people that are either listening or watching the videos. And this all, I like being able to either inspire or, spark confidence in people that may be struggling. There's a wide range of people that reach out saying I help them in this, that, and the other part of their life. And that's what makes this kind of creating content an outlet for, in the same way painting was for me, somebody in a position similar to me when I was looking for painting as an outlet might find my content and consume it and give them a break from whatever they might be going through, or help them in an area of their life where they feel like they're lacking. And so that's very enjoyable for me, and I enjoy that aspect of this content creation. So we have about 10-ish minutes left, and something that I really, really enjoy are books. So people ask me kind of what my favorite books are pretty often. We'll run through a list of books, and I'll kind of give an explanation as to why I like these books. Let's talk about my number one. This number one can kind of be in equal tie with another book, and I'll list them both. Meditations by Marcus Aurelius and How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. Both kind of serve different purposes, and Marcus Aurelius wrote Meditations kind of as a journal, and it kind of chronicles his time as he went through life, right? But he went through life at a much different time period than you and I are going through life. However, if you read those, journal entries, he is going through the same stuff that we are going through. And you can read a journal entry now, and you can read a journal entry 10 years from now, the same journal entry, and you can glean two different lessons from that journal entry. That's why I think the book is so powerful, because it can give you insight into what you're going through, how he handled it, what his outlook on it was. And I think that's always good to get perspective from somebody who has no, immediate influence or bearing on your life. Let's talk about How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. This book is long. Be prepared to be reading it for a while. Audiobook it, read it, do both. It's very important because he breaks down kind of the interpersonal communication styles that work depending on what you're trying to accomplish in the conversation. And this sounds a bit sociopathic, but it's very important because how you deliver your words and how you speak to people can determine how and where the conversation is going, right? So if you understand these dynamics and you can leverage them to, say, push a business meeting into a direction in which you want it to go so that the outcome is more favorable to you, then why wouldn't you, right? It's just psychology. And it also is extremely useful in just social situations, understanding, reading body language, reading the delivery of people and how, what they are saying is being delivered. You can pick up on a ton of context clues and figure out ways to either diffuse a situation that might be escalating or, steer it one way or the other and kind of work toward having a better personal outcome, for yourself and for the conversation of people around you. I'd say tier two book would be A Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. I read this book a couple years ago, and it was around the same time I read Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. And it's also kind of a book that teaches in the same way that Meditations teaches. So it chronicles Victor's time in a concentration camp in, I believe, Nazi Germany. And it comes down to, for him, hope, right? So you think about a concentration camp and realistically, one of the few places on earth where hope can seemingly be completely lost. And he would describe the fellow prisoners that had completely, actually lost hope. And the moment that hope was extinguished in, them, they would end up, dying to the cold or dying to starvation. But the ones that remained hopeful that, the Allies were going to free them, or they would get stories that the Allies were close, and then it would actually be, 2 years to go. The people that held on to the hope ended up, pulling through with him, and he was, one of those people that was a big preacher of just maintaining hope. As bad as it is and as terrible as the situation they're in, remain hopeful for a better tomorrow and make the most out of the situation that you're in today. So I'm also reading another book currently that I think I want to talk about because it goes back into kind of fitness and fashion. And I mean, not fashion, but just fitness. But it's how to change your brain, change your body. And the biggest section of this book that I have enjoyed is the fact that our gut microbiome is extremely powerful, right? So the things that you're putting into your body, whether it be, all natural organic whole foods or processed kind of junk from XYZ brand, it all affects your gut biome, but your gut biome talks to your brain. And in doing so, different things are happening inside of your brain now because of what your gut is signaling. So understanding what healthy food and diet stuff that you are consuming is doing and using it to your advantage, that, I eat healthier, I feel a bit better, my mind is a bit more clear, I'm accomplishing more. I've talked about this, but I view the body as a vehicle, right? It's just trying to get me to where I'm trying to go, like any other goals. So what you're putting inside of it is very important, and that's the way I eat it, the way that I do. And books like this I read it and I know information going in, kind of what it's going to talk about, but you can always learn more stuff. And I think that's very important. Like, find subjects you enjoy and just read about them, because you can learn a lot. And even if it's just reading articles online, that's reading too. It doesn't always have to be a book. So those would probably be my top 4 at the moment. That list could always change. I'm always trying to read books. It's slowed down a bit just because of the amount of content creation, but yeah. It's been a bit. I've touched on a bunch of stuff. Hopefully, even for the people that follow my TikToks and my Instagram and think they have kind of an understanding of my background and stuff, hopefully you get more info from this in a long form. I think for the future, I definitely don't want this to always be solo, because conversation is very good. You learn a lot about two people when they sit down in a room and have a conversation with each other. So the next episode, I am going to have my father on, and he has, a very interesting life story, and you guys will learn a lot about him, which I think in turn will teach you a lot about why I am the way that I am. And so after that, kind of guests that fall into the fellow creators, fashion people, business people, those are the type of guests I want to have on, so that you can get a different perspective than just me kind of talking about the way that I do things all the time, because it is so bland. Like, my life is pretty bland because it is so regimented. And it is that way because of the things that I talked about earlier in the episode. But I'm going to wrap it up here, and I appreciate all of you listening. Hopefully you learned a thing or two, and I will see you all on the next episode.